Hello, my name is Brandon Yared, and today I'm here to speak to you about the obesity epidemic in America. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. I spent many years of my life being at a weight that would be considered morbidly obese. I was 360 pounds at my heaviest. And I am here today to talk to you about what I believe are the three biggest contributors to the obesity epidemic in America. The three factors that I consider to be the biggest contributors to the obesity epidemic in America are the increasingly sedentary work and recreation habits of the American populace, the cost-value relationship between healthy foods and unhealthy foods, as well as availability and shelf lifespan of healthy versus unhealthy foods. And lastly, I think that we have a cultural and habitual disruption of our settling points, which we're going to go into great detail about a little bit later on. So if we talk about increasingly sedentary lifestyle habits, both with work and recreation, we can start to look at things like elevators versus stairs. We can start to look at things like, are we sitting and emailing, or are we carrying copies or files? These small changes in our workplace, and then not to mention changes like when we get home, are we gardening? Are we whittling? Are we woodworking or for our hobbies? Or are we watching TV, watching Netflix, playing video games, playing online, which are enjoyable activities that most of us participate in, but they are decidedly not calorically intensive. And recent studies have supported that sitting for 8 hours of your day is as bad for you by most metrics as smoking cigarettes, as smoking a pack a day. And the unfortunate nature of the negative impact of sitting for most of the day, it cannot be outweighed by extra time in the gym, according to this research. So it's really interesting that we continue to facilitate doing physically less and less with technology, right? With our phones, with our computers, we find recreation and we find work that requires less and less of our bodies. And as a result, our bodies are deteriorating. There's a use it or lose it principle at work here. My martial arts instructor, Dr. Patrick Finley, did his doctoral thesis in public health about the comparative effects of technology on caloric output in a day. And he took something very small, the transition from mechanical typewriters to electric typewriters. He was doing his research in the 80s. And he was able to figure out through his study and through his calculations that the average typist or administrative assistant would gain 8 pounds in a year solely based on the switch from a mechanical typewriter to an electrical typewriter, because the small caloric outputs of our daily tasks add up. And we continue to reduce the number of clicks, reduce the number of swipes, the number of gestures. We continue to condense with our ergonomics. We continue to require less and less of an individual in order to perform more and more functions. So I think that we can extend the concept that my teacher's research supported to our daily lives. The second major factor that I think is really critical to the obesity epidemic in America, research supports that the obesity epidemic strikes the low-income population disproportionately. And some of the reasoning that's been put forth by that is that there's what's referred to as food deserts in a lot of major cities, where there's not ready access to fresh fruits and vegetables, healthy foods. And then if we add on to that the concept of volume, right? How much volume can I afford to feed my family if I have, a young family, children who are hungry? For $20, I can feed everybody if I go to a fast food establishment, and everybody can be full, which is a cultural goal in America, is feeling satiated, to feel full. And advertising drives that more and more. So when you say to somebody, hey, you can buy a few ears of corn and a couple bananas, and That's what you get for your $15 or whatever. It's difficult to sell healthy foods to poor people on a limited budget. Not to mention that unhealthy foods tend to preserve longer. So candy bars have an almost unlimited shelf life, right? But healthy alternatives, carrot sticks, celery, broccoli, these things perish very quickly, which requires more planning, more trips to the store, and more money. The potential for more food to be wasted, which, speaking as somebody who's come from a low socioeconomic background, that is a cultural transgression, if ever there was one, in low socioeconomic areas. To throw out food, to waste food, is reprehensible. So the idea of buying food which might perish quickly is culturally not supported in low socioeconomic environments. So there needs to be, research indicates that there needs to be better education about how to budget appropriately and which foods and which type of preparations will last longer and stretch further while still maintaining healthy, nutritional, dense diets. Lastly, let's look into how the physiological processes of digestion and the positive incentive reward system of our brains are manipulated by advertising and culture to cause a homeostasis disruption and habits of diet and hunger that may not support our best physiological potentials. In the normal process of digestion, when food is consumed, it is converted into energy via chemical processes in the digestive tract. Glucose receptors in the stomach alert the central nervous system when we are full. These neurons also trigger the release of insulin and leptin, which in turn activate the dopaminergic reward systems of the central nervous system. Here we can see a schematic of how leptin and insulin act directly to create dopamine in the central nervous system. The dopamine reward system of the brain is largely responsible for the effect of drugs, alcohol, and nicotine. It is also highly stimulated by sugar and glucose. It is not, however, so stimulated by things like vegetables. Vendors and retailers are all too aware of these facts, which is why sugar has been added to just about every product on the market. Even worse is the constant advertising and culture of consumerism that corporations have been building in America and across the globe. This leads to overconsumption of sugar and calories on a massive scale. Lastly, the cultural evolution of eating meals at a consistent time throughout our days versus grazing throughout the day as food is available has greatly corrupted our natural homeostasis in digestion. So again, to summarize, the technologically facilitated sedentary lifestyles, both in work and recreation, of America's popular culture, combined with the cost-value differential between healthy foods and non-healthy foods, and the need for greater education in low-income communities about how to appropriately monetize, or rather how to appropriately spend funds to get the best diets that they can get. And we've also talked about the physiological processes of digestion and the sense of hunger, and how really culturally we've disrupted our natural course of evolution and the natural way that our bodies evolved. And now we have to struggle with making lifestyle changes and deliberately ignoring some instincts that no longer serve us. In some sense, we could call this a vestigial desire. It's an evolutionary drive to consume at all costs that we have to resist for our own good.